Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. So you're here to hear somebody talk about the biggest mistake they've ever made, right? That's the topic of my talk today. And I have a distinct privilege. I hope I don't embarrass her, but this is the first time. I've done this like 4 times. And this is the first time somebody that's a personal friend and mentor is actually in the room. A colleague of mine from GE, Jacinth Smiley. So I always tell the truth, but I'll be extra careful because then you'll be able to verify if anything I've said is not actually backed up, right? So we're all finance people, we're all business people, and in business, what is king? I got finance people in the room and we're timid. What is king in business? Cash. Do I have any chess players in the room? Any chess players? What is the most powerful piece on a chessboard? The queen. So if the game of business was similar to the game of chess, what would be queen in business? Cash. Somebody said cash. Come on, think with me. Okay, you quit. All right, fine. And this was the biggest mistake I ever made as well. I underestimated the impact and influence of culture. Culture is queen in business. Culture. Culture will drive your cash, positively or negatively. Culture is queen. And so that was the biggest mistake I ever made, is I didn't understand in leading a transformation, and this is what the theme of the conference will be a lot about, transforming. And when you're leading a transformation, as finance people, you know, we are seeing how business is starting to value our skill set so much more that we're being able to go from being CFOs to CEOs, from running finance teams to running divisions to running entire companies, because we have the capabilities of connecting dots and fixing problems and solving processes and re-engineering how things connect to improve outcomes and profits and productivity and efficiency and effectiveness. Business is starting to reward our function over and over again and again. You read the Wall Street Journal and the financial papers and you see finance leaders getting big business leading roles because of the transformative power we have as finance folks. But one of the mistakes I made, and it was a critical mistake, is in my first CFO role, I focused on building culture within my finance team and driving transformation within my finance team, and it went really, really well. But where I failed was to understand the culture that I was doing it in. Now, there's a lot of definitions of culture. I don't claim to be an anthropologist. I'm a finance guy with a degree in accounting, so I keep it really simple. It's about how things get done, what you value, and how people relate. That's how I define culture. How things get done, what people value, and how they interact or relate with each other, right? You can say it like behaviors, attitudes, and relationships. That's culture in a very basic kind of definition. And when you're a finance person, or this particular type of finance person being me, you deal with your job and your roles as if you're working in an organization. And organizations are materially different than families. Would you agree? A family is materially different than an organization. So if you walk into a role and you don't understand that you bring an organizational approach to what is considered to be a family, there's going to be, can we say, cultural disconnects, right? So I go into this role where family is the primary goal. They want to be a family. And when you're a family, results aren't necessarily as important as the relationships. But in an organization, what's paramount? Results. And I was sent to deliver results. I didn't know I was sent to become a member of a family. And I approached it like I was supposed to solve problems when they wanted me to first sit and become a member of the family. Now, my finance team didn't have a problem with me running it like an organization. They responded very well. But it was my peers who had been in the business for 30 years. Now, I'm sure this is not true for anybody in the room, but you know there's a difference between 30 years of experience and 1 year of experience repeated 30 times. In an organization, you can probably have 30 years of experience. But in a family, it is often that you'll find 1 year of experience repeated 30 times. So you can imagine a guy being parachuted in thinking, I'm here to improve an organization that's being run like a family, and you don't understand that. And so what I learned is that in leading a transformation, especially as finance people, we're looking to raise the bar on performance. Yes? Leading indicators, key performance indicators, quality metrics, effectiveness, productivity, profitability. When we're transforming, we're trying to elevate those numbers. But if you go after processes before you connect with people, you'll slow down your transformation outcomes. Now again, I succeeded in affecting the culture in the finance function, but the broader organization being run like a family, I was countercultural. And because I was countercultural, there was conflict. And when there's conflict, obviously it takes focus away from what you're trying to get done in the broader organization. And so each of you in your various roles, you're leading change, you're driving change, you're spearheading change, but are you taking the time to assess the culture that you're doing what you're doing in? Because at the end of the day, culture is more powerful than cash. And here's how you know. You'll, in a couple of days or maybe later today, and I'm only bringing this up because I'm from Queens and I feel a certain sort of way about the Golden State Warriors and how they fired my man Marc Jackson, right? Because he's from my neck of the woods in Queens. He was winning. The numbers were up. Everything was working, but his particular style clashed with the culture. And so now he's back next to Jeff Van Gundy and Mike Breen doing commentary instead of winning rings. Right? It wasn't his coaching ability. It wasn't his knowledge of X and O's. It wasn't his relationship with the players. The players loved him. It was his ability to relate outside of the team with his front office peers and management. And so for you, you need to assess as you're driving the change, because the Warriors were not world champions when Marc Jackson entered the organization. But over time, you know, now they're supposedly the best team ever. But I feel a certain sort of way about that too. Don't tell Jen. Don't tell Jen. But it's about making sure you understand how your skill set, your capabilities, your vision, your aspirations to drive change fit into the broader context of the culture that you're trying to work in. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing all the right things in process, but you haven't done all the right things with people, that will disrupt the progress you can make on your processes. And so that's the biggest mistake I've ever made, is walking into an organization with a mandate from HR to, the exact words from the HR leader was, go make that place more professional. So I thought I had all the support I needed. HR said, go make that place more professional. But in going, the HR leader didn't tell me it was a family. And so I went thinking I was going to an organization. And organizations focus on mission first, people second. right? An organization can take really good care of people, but it takes care of people after they make sure everything is mission central. A family takes care of people first. And if we get around to taking care of the mission, that's okay. And you can imagine as a finance person walking into a family organization, the metrics didn't look like an organization you would expect it to look like. You had, just one example, you had vendors that had been vendors for 30 years with no RFP, request for proposal, submitted in over 10 years. So what's the first thing, my finance people in the room, what's the first thing comes to your mind if you have a vendor providing a service for 30 years with no RFP for 10 years? What's the first thing comes to your mind? Charging too much, stealing money, not getting the right outcomes on service, right? Exactly the same thing I thought. So I said, hey guys, we need to examine this particular vendor. But they were part of the family too. So nobody wanted to scrutinize the relationship because clearly they've been working with this particular vendor this long. They wouldn't steal from us. They're part of the family. Well, we're all finance people, so you know what I found, right? Overcharging, under-delivering, waste. But that's what happens in a family culture versus an organization. So the biggest lesson I've learned out of that job and into every future job I've had since is before I try to transform the process, I connect with the people and I connect with the broader culture. Because as the CFO, when you walk in, people are going to connect with you because their ability to continue to earn a paycheck is at least tangentially connected to you liking them, right? So they're going to go along with your program more or less. But your peers that sit at the executive leadership table and the general management and the management that the management reports to, connecting to their cultural rhythms and dynamics are core and critical to you being able to deliver on your mission to raise the bar on performance. So while you're elevating the bar on performance, make sure you're also raising your awareness of the behaviors, the attitudes, and the relationships that constitute the culture, because all business organizational transformational change is really rooted in cultural change, because culture is comprised of people, and people drive your processes. So to the degree that you want to revolutionize a process, you're going to have to connect with people and the culture created by those people in order to be successful. And that's the biggest mistake I've ever made and the lessons I learned. Questions, Tori? We taking questions? Yeah. Okay, questions. Don't all jump at once. Yes, ma'am. How did I undo the damage done? Now remember, I told you there's somebody in the room that was actual witness to what happened. So I cannot tell a lie, right? You get out of the role, right? I was there for 3 years and it wasn't going to change. They wanted to be a family. And so you create a situation where you redesign your role and the roles of those that report to you, and you eliminate your job and you go do something else. Questions? Yes, sir. So I read a book called Why Should Anyone Be Led by You by Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones. And what it talked about was another guy who was working at the BBC, driving tremendous change, had great relationships. When he was let go, the entire office building stood in a line, one on each side, and he walked through and they all applauded and clapped, but he got fired. And the reason he got fired is he clashed with the board of directors. So what I would do differently is I would go a lot slower helping my peers, again, because I had no challenges in the finance function, but I had a lot of challenges with my peers who didn't understand what I was doing. And so I would go a lot slower, bringing my peers along so they could understand why I was doing what I was doing and how the results that I was generating, because I was generating great results. People were getting promoted, all the numbers that should go up were going up, all the numbers that should go down were going down. But my peers didn't understand how and why I was doing what I was doing. And so when you don't understand, you're against. And I would go a lot slower helping my peers understand what I was driving. Yes. I'm coming right back to you. Yes.
Were your incentives aligned, your peers versus the board order, or was there a conflict in that? Perhaps they say, well, you were achieving your goals, but not necessarily
See, and that's what's your name? Marwin?
Yeah.
Marwin. That's a great point, right? The alignment of incentives, I would think in an organization are definitely more likely to be calibrated than in a family. Because for me, acting in the best interest of the enterprise meant things that were wasteful stop being wasted, things that should be more productive be more productive. But that wasn't necessarily the incentive of some of my peers. They wanted status quo. And so they would fight to keep things as they were because some people, that is how they justified their existence. If I make changes, maybe my job goes away. If we automate this, then what will I do? And so the incentives weren't necessarily aligned because the thinking wasn't calibrated to acting in the best interest of the enterprise and what I call, if you keep the golden goose healthy, everybody eats. But if you don't, then people are in jeopardy. But everybody doesn't think that way.
So you may have kind of already answered the way I think you're going to answer. So you've got the 30-year person. They're set in their ways. It's been working for them for 30 years. Now you're trying to penetrate the shell to try to get movement out of that person. So how do you penetrate that shell? Because your goal and their goal may be different, right?
Yep.
They may just be wanting to come in, to do what they've done, they're comfortable in it, and now you're trying, they've been going this way for 30 years, now you want them to go this way. How do you penetrate that? What's your recommendation on that?
So look, all of us have teams of different size. We have organizations with different resource capacities. Everybody can't run the same play. But ultimately, everybody on your team doesn't want to get promoted, right? But there are people on your team who do want to get promoted. And what I have found is high-performing people want to work with other high-performing people. And your credibility as a leader is predicated on how you deal with underperforming people. If you don't deal with underperforming people in a way that maintains their dignity, but holds the mission of the organization and the performance of the team at a high visible level, then everything starts to regress to the mean. And so when you have a person with 30 years of experience who's not trying to get better, you either have to quarantine that person so that they can't infect and influence the rest of the team with mediocrity, or you have to make a tough call. But the way you make that tough call is, at least for me, I would raise the bar on their performance expectation, and they would either rise to the bar or they would vote themselves off the island. But the team had to know that you were serious about maintaining performance standards. Because otherwise everybody, if this person gets to keep their job and gets a bonus and gets rewarded and they work at 60% of capacity, why am I trying to work at 80, 85, 90, 100, 110? Because ultimately as a leader, I don't know about you, but ultimately as a leader for me, what I'm always trying to figure out is how do I tap into the discretionary effort of the people on my team? Because everybody's gonna work because they have a job description and they have a paycheck. But who's gonna give you that discretionary effort? And that comes with how you treat the high-performing people and the underperforming people. When high-performing people see underperforming people get carried along, you lose some of that discretionary effort. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Irene.
Say it again.
Irene.
Hi, Irene.
Yes. My question is, what are some of the practical ways that you can actually connect with people, especially if you find those that do not want to change? And
You said what's practical ways to motivate?
to connect.
To connect.
Yes.
So look, I can only tell you what works for me, right? And you have to deal with people as people before you deal with them as performers. So it's about knowing their names. It's about knowing their marital status. It's about knowing where they went to school, what sports they like. But the way I found you get there is you tell them about you first. You initiate the self-revelations. Like I've had GE had a process that they used to call new manager assimilation, where after you take over a team, 90 days later, they interview your team without you present, and they ask them all kinds of questions to figure out how the relationship is going. And this is one of the first big teams I had at GE, and the new manager assimilation was being conducted. And at the end, the HR leader said, Mark, tell me what their manager's favorite cereal was. But that's the kind of thing I would get into. I'm like, hey, are you a Captain Crunch or a Fruity Pebbles kind of guy? You know? And you just have these kinds of conversations where you just connect, and people start to feel like they know you as a person. You start to know them as people. And that's how I've been able to connect with people and tap into what I consider to be the gold of leadership, which is people's discretionary effort. Yes.
Hi, Mark. I'm Dory. How are you?
Hi, Lori.
How did you fit in professional coaching or mentoring for yourself and your teams in that space, and how impactful was that for you?
So I'm a big fan of mentors and coaches. You know, I collect mentors and coaches like people collect friends on Facebook or followers on Instagram, right? I believe you can never have too many people helping you see how you're doing and how you're performing and give you input and feedback. And so you have to model that. If people don't see, and one of the ways I would model it for my team is I would invite people into our staff meetings to talk to us. And they would see people that I hold myself accountable to professionally in different settings talk about our relationship and how they give me feedback or whatever, just so that they would be clear that the person leading the team isn't, Hair Club for Men. I'm not just the president, I'm a customer, right? I'm not just telling you to get feedback, I actually get feedback, I actually get coaching. And it makes it a lot more normal and natural when the leader is transparent about that process in their own lives.
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
I'm Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Talk a little bit more about the incentive this issue. You said that was a part of the sort of the challenges that on a peer-to-peer that made the company. What would have been better incentives? Were they financial incentives? Who or how would that have been better constructed for all-around success?
So I'm a finance guy, I'm not really a compensation plan design guy, but the way I think about it, money matters, right? And so if you hit your number and you miss your number and the outcomes are exactly the same, there's no incentive to do anything different, right? So like one example is we had a budget problem, and the way this particular team, when I walked in the door, they would celebrate the fact that at the end of the year, they could return to the parent $25 million. And I said, well, hey guys, if we have $25 million surplus at the end of the year, that means some other part of the business was under-resourced, and some people we know might have gotten laid off, or some projects might not have gotten properly funded. So you're feeling like heroes, but maybe somebody's gotten laid off because you over-asked. Those kind of things weren't in people's minds. And so, to me, finance, numbers always kind of hit people at a very visceral level. And so if you reward people that perform properly and you have consequences for people that don't meet expectations, I think things start to align themselves naturally and people start to elevate their performance.